Hi, welcome back to La Belle Vie. Today I'm going to revisit the Dan Markel case, and specifically a time frame that I think is really critical to the conspiracy and murder for hire trial. And I'm specifically talking about the 2-week time period when Wendi Adelson was in South Florida right before Dan Markel was murdered. And this is specifically June 30, 2014 to July 11, 2014. Now, if you recall, right before Wendi traveled to South Florida with her parents and the boys for that 2-week period on June 30, starting June 30, she had just been on a trip with Jeffrey Lacoste to Gainesville. So I'll call this interesting point number 1. And we've heard a lot of the testimony, both from Wendi, from her interview with police after the murder, both her testimony in the 2 trials, and we've also, of course, seen Jeffrey Lacoste's interviews with police as well as his testimony. So there's a lot there. But I think what's interesting to note is that there was clearly a huge blow up. And as Jeffrey Lacoste described, that night, Wendi was extremely upset. I believe he described the drive back to Tallahassee that Sunday as being the most awkward ride ever.
On the drive back, you had described as the most awkward drive ever?
Yes.
Okay, and so you returned to Tallahassee, and the next day, she leaves to Miami.
That's...
But in any event, recall that what Jeff Lacoste accused her of, and what he kind of finally said, in his own words, he said that he'd been kind of suspicious, but hadn't really completely had a full, specific conversation with her, and that's what happened that weekend. And that was because he was suspicious that Wendi had been cheating on him from the time that they had made their relationship more committed in the spring of 2014, that she had been cheating on him with a former classmate of hers from undergrad, Daniel. Not Danny, Daniel. And if you recall, Wendi had testified she had been seeing him in the fall, as well as Jeffrey Lacoste. And you will recall that Jeffrey Lacoste had said that he was still kind of concerned, even a month after they supposedly committed, that she was still seeing Daniel.
I had a work trip in Gainesville, and Ms. Adelson accompanied me. And the relationship had been it'd been a huge roller coaster of up and down and love bombing, and I received a lot of manipulation and lying. And I guess it was the night, June 28th, that Saturday, we had a relationship conflict. We had I don't know if argument's quite the right word, but I was kind of tired of being strung along. And it was just what it felt like. I couldn't figure out why I was being strung along, but that's what it felt like. And we sort of headed out.
All right. So when was the next time you saw her after the big fight?
Well, the next day we drove from Gainesville to Tallahassee. So I saw her then, and I dropped her off at her house. It was a very awkward, multiple-hour trip from Gainesville to Tallahassee.
All right. And did that feel like the end of the relationship at that time?
It wasn't great, but no, it didn't feel like the end. No, in fact, she said otherwise. I mean, I actually distinctly remember departing her house and her saying that this was not the end. But as I said, I felt like I was being strung along, where it was a constant roller coaster in a way that seemed purposeful and manipulative.
All right. So that takes us to June 30th of 2014, when you part ways after this sort of bad trip to Gainesville.
Yes, I dropped her off at her house on Arco Ridge, and yeah, right.
When do you see her next after that?
I see her next July 13th, after she had spent 2 weeks in South Florida. We did have communications in that time period, but I didn't see her.
And in fact, he discussed an awkward incident in late May of 2014, where he actually went into a coffee shop, and there she was having coffee with him. Now, of course, Wendi's testimony is that they were just friends. He was leaving town. It was all innocent. We'll never know. But what we do know, that it was a significant enough fight that it was very disturbing and upsetting for both Wendy and Jeff.
Yeah, he got really mad.
What sparked that?
That was what was really sort of surprising. Is Daniel had been gone. We'd had a month of like really great times, very happy month, and we went out to a nice dinner with friends and then got back to the hotel room, and I could just tell he was upset. And so for me, it kind of came out of nowhere.
Was that in Gainesville?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's when Jeff wanted to look at your phone or something?
Yeah. Did Jane tell you that?
Yeah.
So he had said that he wouldn't. It wasn't that time, but he had said, you know, you know, like if Jeff would be over and I was doing something, I would leave my phone out. I have this like old agenda book. I'd leave that out. And basically he said that he like saw that I had called Daniel and he saw that.
Daniel Sack?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sorry, that's why I said there's Danny and then there's Daniel.
Gotcha.
So it had really upset me that he had gone through my phone and that he had, I mean, I was just, the whole time I was just kind of crying. I was just really sad. I felt like we had a great relationship and his behavior made me think that I couldn't really be with someone like that. And I didn't really say much other than I was just really like, no, I didn't cheat on you. Like, yes, I saw Daniel in the fall. Like, no, I haven't seen him more than as a friend since February. And like, if you don't trust me, we can't really do this. So, and then he was, you know, really sad and apologetic and was like, oh my God, you know, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me and I'm going to lose you. And
So when they drive up that Sunday, if you recall, Wendy testified that her parents were arriving in Tallahassee later that afternoon because they were going to accompany her when they drove back to South Florida the next day. So if you can again think about her state of mind right before that 2-week period, you know, clearly there had been a pretty emotional fight between the two from both sides. Both sides testified that they, you know, it was a very upsetting matter. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that at the time she's going to South Florida, she's had kind of this dramatic quasi breakup with Jeffrey Lacasse, and that was kind of her mental state at that time. So I think that's important to remember. Now, point 2 is on that June 30th, the day that Wendy was going to drive with her parents back down to South Florida. This was the first time when she went over to get the kids. This was the first time she met Dan's new girlfriend. And I'll insert some testimony here about how she felt about that. So listen in.
once in the last couple of weeks she was visiting. She lives in New York.
Okay. Do you know anything about her?
I know some things about her. She's also a law professor. I know she's recently divorced and she has a son. I don't know if her divorce is final, but I think recently divorced.
Where's she a law professor
At NYU.
Okay.
And they seemed very happy, and I mean, I think that was a really good thing in his life. He seemed really happy about it. She came down here, she met the boys, and I met her, and she told me how great she loved the boys. You know, like it seemed fine.
She ever stay at the house with him?
Just that one time.
When was that?
I remember because I just got back from being with my family in South Florida. Sorry.
It's okay. You're doing great.
So what date was it? I went with my family. It was my dad's 70th birthday, and we went home for it. So his birthday was the 5th. I left Monday the 30th, so she must have come into town Saturday, the evening of the 28th.
What month?
June.
This past June.
Just now. So June 28th, and then she was there with the boys the 29th, and then I met her on the morning of the 30th when I picked up the kids to take them to South Florida.
Now, I have two takeaways for this. I've always wondered if Wendy wasn't jealous of Danny's new girlfriend. She was, a rock star. I mean, she was a professor at NYU, very successful in her own right. Certainly, I don't think there's any suggestion that she needed a husband to kind of help get her a job at her law school. I think she did that all on her own. I'll insert here some interesting testimony. I mean, Wendy certainly described her as being very pretty, but pretty for her age, which I think is a bit odd.
Do you know how old Amy is?
She's 50.
She's 50?
Yeah. She doesn't look 50. She's very beautiful. She is, not that you can't be beautiful at 50, but she looks really young. She's very pretty and accomplished. And
You know her date of birth?
I only know that she is 50. I don't, because I was looking her up one time, feeling.
Oh, okay.
I just always wondered if Wendy wasn't jealous. We certainly know that Danny's new girlfriend, in addition to being accomplished herself, came from, kind of someone in her family was fairly well known, and it was understood that they spent a lot of weekends in the Hamptons. And so you're thinking Wendy likes South Florida. She likes the glitz and the glam. She hates Tallahassee, allegedly. You can imagine that she might be jealous of Danny getting to go to New York City and getting to spend time in the Hamptons and being around all this kind of potential celebrities and etc. So, I don't know. I've always wondered if Wendy wasn't jealous. What do you think? The other thing that struck me a bit was that she seemed quite fragile with matters involving Dan.
Today's the 18th. It was Friday the 11th. It's my other brother's birthday. And I would have seen him, but I had been with the kids for like 12 days straight, and I was getting really sad at the idea of drop off of Danny coming to pick him up. And so my folks said, you know what, why don't you just, so at about 4:45, I just went over to a friend's house. I didn't see him that day.
I mean, we know from testimony that I pointed out in an earlier video that she would sometimes drive by her old house because she was sad, which again, if you left the relationship, I'm not sure why you're, driving by your ex's house. I certainly wouldn't do that. But it also just seems she was very fragile around him. And we know that she didn't like talking with him on the phone. And that was a matter of contention between the two. But I also found that this was an interesting point here. So I'm going to insert this testimony here and let me know what you think.
Then Monday morning, I went and picked up the kids, and that was the weekend that Amy was visiting, Danny's girlfriend. So that was my first time meeting Amy. So I went to our former house, and I was really, anxious to meet Amy and kind of sad about 6:20. Sad about the whole thing. And so my dad was like, well, I'll stand with you. So my dad stood next to me on the doorbell, and Amy was perfectly lovely. And I picked up the kids, and they seemed really happy, and got in the car and said goodbye.
Okay.
So why did she feel so fragile that she had to bring her dad with her to go get the kids because she knew she was going to meet the new girlfriend? I mean, that just seems weird. It seems odd to me. Like, what are we in high school? I don't know. That seems strange to me. And again, maybe it's not. And I just thought it was odd that the first time she meets the new girlfriend, she's got to bring her dad with her. And then she described it as being sad. And it's like, why are you sad? Because in some parts of the interview, you're saying Danny was in a better place. He, met this great girl. Then why are you sad? You left him. So I just think that's odd. I just don't see how those two things go together unless perhaps there's some jealousy. Like, when, with Dan, he seems to be moving on with someone who's extremely accomplished and maybe more well suited for him. And he seems really happy. And then, flip it to her. As I just mentioned, she had just come back from Gainesville and had this, horrible blowout fight with Jeffrey Lacasse, was, from Wendy's side, was very disappointed that he didn't trust her. So, the other guy, Daniel, has left to go to teach up in the Northeast. So, I don't know. What do you think? Now, this is the part where I don't think I've heard anyone talk about this piece of Jeffrey Lacasse's testimony. So I'm about to insert it, but basically setting the stage. This is during Katie Magbanua's second trial, and it's on cross-examination from her attorney. And Tara Kawas is asking Jeffrey Lacasse, basically, what was the state of their relationship? They had just talked about the Gainesville trip, and Jeffrey's talking about the amount of, kind of communication they had when she was in South Florida for those 2 weeks. And again, that's the mystery, what was going on during those 2 weeks. So I thought this was interesting and it really piqued my interest. So I'm going to insert it here and then we'll talk about it.
So on July 1st of 2014, she would have been in Miami, as best as you can recollect.
Yes.
Okay. And all the way up until July 30th.
Yes.
All the time she's texting with you, communicating with you while she's in Miami, right?
Yeah, we had 5 to 10 communications, some phone calls, some video chats with the kids. She was cleaning out her childhood room in Coral Springs. I remember video chatting with her and the kids. So yeah, that's right.
So I just think that's odd. Why would she be needing to clean out her childhood bedroom now? We know that she's been married since 2006, so it wasn't like a situation where she got married and she needed to clean out her childhood bedroom. We know she's been going to South Florida at this time multiple times, so presumably there's not a space reason for her to need to clean out her childhood bedroom all of a sudden on this 2-week trip right before Dan Markel's murder. The other thing is, it wasn't like the house was on the market. I'm not going to show the details, but you can tell by public records that the house was actually put on the market. The Coral Springs home was put on the market in July of 2015, 1 year later, and it was sold in August 2015. So it's not like during that 2-week time period in 2014, there was some dire need for Wendy to clean out her childhood bedroom because her parents were putting the house on the market. So I just think that's odd. So what do you think? So the fourth kind of strange thing, just to keep in mind, again, state of mind, what's going on during this 2-week time period, is now that she's back in Tallahassee, she has that last kind of dinner and movie date with Jeffrey Lacasse on that Sunday, July 13th. And that's when Jeffrey testified that they went back to her house and they were having a conversation. And then that's when Wendy really looked at him seriously this time and told him this about the hit.
It's been a couple weeks since the big fight.
Yes.
And where did you see her?
I talked on the phone in the interim, and long story short, decided to keep going, to not break up, to continue to pursue the relationship. So we had a date. I picked her up at her house and we went to the movies and dinner.
Right. And did you return back to her residence after your date?
I did. We did.
Was there anything unusual about her behavior that evening?
Well, she made a very strange statement to me at the house.
Tell us about that, please.
Yeah. So we're walking into the house, we're having chit chat, and she says, "Can I tell something to you confidentially?" And I said, "Sure." And she tells me that last summer, when the relocation got denied, Charlie investigated multiple ways to fix this problem with Dan Markel, including hiring a hitman, and that it was going to cost about $15,000. And I'm unsure if that number's 15,000 or 50,000 because they sound similar, but she told me that the previous summer, that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed by a hitman.
All right, so that would have been the summer of 2013.
Yes.
Okay, and when she told you this statement, you previously characterized the TV statement as a joke. Was this statement also in the characterization of a joke?
No, these are two discrete, completely different things. She had a joke she would make about TV being cheaper than a hitman. I knew that joke. This was a separate statement. This was chilling. This wasn't funny. This made my stomach flip. I found it disturbing at the time. It's completely different.
And the statement was made 5 days before the murder of Dan Markel
That's correct.
by a hitman.
That's right.
So again, odd. Why is she, we know that she's told this joke about the TV being cheaper than a hitman, but as Jeffrey testified to under oath that this was a different conversation, it was very serious. And so it's interesting that she would have this conversation with Jeffrey right after she's been home for 2 weeks and literally the week of Dan Markel's murder, that Sunday, and he was murdered on Friday. Okay, so after this dinner date, then we have the, odd yoga session the next day, and that's where Jeffrey got the bad vibes, and then she sent this email to him later that night saying, she didn't want anything to, no contact for a week, which is odd because as Jeffrey Lacoste said, they had just been on a 2-week break away from each other. So I thought that was odd. I also think it's odd that everyone seemed to think that he was a suspect potentially anyway. I'm going to insert some of that testimony here.
I think that's not right. Who would have done this?
I have just
And
one
are they
idea.
going to come after my kids? Or me? Who's next?
Is Jeff this much of a lunatic?
I don't even think of Jeff. I hope to God not.
May I ask who Jeff is?
Yeah, of
I think
course.
you should. I think Wendy's been seeing a guy called Jeff,
Who's a friend of Jane's. And
who's jealous.
yeah.
Are you still currently seeing him, or just something you kind of let taper off?
It's been a bad week.
Okay.
Yeah, Jane and I actually went for a walk together Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, early this week.
Earlier this week, but you've taken a 1 week break from
I took a 1 week break from communication with Jeff to figure out what to do.
Okay.
Because we've been dating for like 9 months, so like 10 months a year.
And when you use the word dating to you, that's my boyfriend, or is it more of just dating, like the casual?
Yeah.
No, he was my boyfriend and involved with the kids, and I mean, yeah.
So again, Jane comes in and some friend and immediately says, oh, I think, what about Jeff Lacoste? And that never even made sense to me, particularly because Jane said jealousy. And I'm like, well, he would be jealous of Daniel. Not Danny. Daniel would be who he was jealous of. And I'm also wondering if that doesn't make more sense. I always thought it was odd when Wendy, very kind of abruptly corrected Detective Isom in the beginning of her interview, when the day when Dan Markel was murdered, when she corrected Detective Isom and said, no one calls him Daniel, he's Danny.
Your last phone conversation, okay, your last personal contact, in other words, in person with Daniel, was when?
He goes by Danny.
Danny, okay.
No one calls him Daniel.
I don't know him, so I'm
I'm
sorry.
just telling
Okay,
you
Danny.
so that it just feels really personal. Oh,
Maybe she didn't like him calling him Daniel because she thinks of someone else as Daniel. I don't know. Maybe.
is this like a
It's a calendar thing, so it's telling you to talk to JRL.
Okay, yeah. So I have been talking to friends this week about what to do about Jeff, whether to get back together with him. And yesterday I talked to my friend Joey, who had some ideas. And so I put that in my calendar for Monday because that'll have been a week since I've not talked to him. So I put it in to remind myself, okay, now it's been a week, and to ask him these questions. These are the things I was thinking about and things I want to talk to him about.
And when you're referring to this, you're saying Daniel, not Danny.
Daniel Sack.
Right. That's who you're saying. His aggression or his jealousy, however you want to talk about it, however you want to describe it,
Yeah.
is towards Daniel Sack.
Because Jeff really felt like, yeah, no, it's all about Daniel Sack, because Jeff just felt like everything was fine now that Daniel has moved to Amherst, and I kind of felt like if you're going to be insecure, it's going to be someone else some other time, but it's not just Daniel, that it's like something going on.
But this has never happened. This is for this
This is
coming
my
month.
calendar for Monday I'm writing down things to talk to him about.
Okay.
Makes me sound like a total weirdo.
No, that's fine. I just was curious because I saw Daniel, and I know you told me it's to you to.
Well, because I
Your
dated
ex-husband
him,
is
and it's like,
Danny.
and he goes by Danny, like anyone who's friends with him. Nobody calls him Daniel. I mean, it's just his given name, but there's not a person on earth that calls him that knows him. So he goes by Dan or Danny, and his niece and nephew call him Bo. A lot of the family calls him Bo as a nickname. But Daniel Sack is Daniel Sack.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. When's the last time you talked to Daniel Sack?
I talked to him this week.
Okay.
Um,
Everything's fine with him?
Yeah, he's living in Massachusetts. He's happy.
Okay.
We had a nice chat.
Okay.
I mean, he's my friend, and
All right.
yeah.
Okay.
Also, what was weird was that, remember during this week, Wendy allegedly had laryngitis. So remember, she couldn't talk to anybody. Now, Jeff didn't mention anything about her having laryngitis, but apparently she did. And that was presumably why she couldn't talk to Dan all week about their kids, one of their oldest boy, and where he was going to go to kindergarten. And she talks about that laryngitis in the police interview, but then she's doing all this stuff all that week. I mean, she testified, or she stated in her police interview that Thursday, the day before the murder, she had spent some long period of time with a new friend, and they had gone downtown and had fun at the food trucks.
I talked to Carrie yesterday. I was taking a walk around 5. I met a new friend last night, a friend of a friend, this girl Malia. We went to Tallahassee food trucks last night, hung out with her for hours.
And she had been having long walks with Jane, talking about the relationship. So how was she having all these conversations if she was sick with laryngitis? I don't know. Seems odd to me. It seems like another reason for that could be, well, maybe Wendy, it's a good kind of cover for her not to have to talk to anybody in days leading up to an alleged conspiracy. Well, we know it's a conspiracy to murder, but again, who knows? Again, this is just all alleged and my opinion, and, nothing is, facts. It's all opinion, and everyone should do their own research. But I just always thought that was weird that, she put Jeffrey Lacoste on this weird 1 week, you can't talk to me. And he had been such a close person in her life. Even talking with her on that 2-week, trip to Florida, South Florida, maybe not as much as they normally would have. But I think Jeffrey Lacoste also testified that sometimes she would kind of disappear when she went to South Florida anyway. And in fact, remember, he had said during some of his police interviews that he had always suspected that she might have a guy down in South Florida. So again, this is all alleged. Pure speculation, who knows? And of course, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So thank you so much for joining. I will be digging some more into this 2-week time frame, and maybe there's not much more to find. That is why I also said, about Katie's proffer. I know some experts have come out and said they don't think that there's anything in there. I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that. We'll see. But gosh, I would love to know if Katie knew anything about the comings and goings, what was going on in that South Florida, that 2-week period. But again, thank you so much for joining. If you would consider liking and subscribing, that would be awesome. And I hope to see you in my next one. Bye.